And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Truth Warrior, broadcasting live from truthfrequencyradio.com. And I'm here hosting the show. My name is David Whitehead. I'm here from Toronto, Canada. And I apologize that we got cut off there with Richard Garner in the first hour. Man, he's just a wealth of information. He's been doing this for a long time, and I greatly respect his opinion. I really wish we had some more time. We could have discussed some of those subjects we were just getting into with him, but he's definitely agreed to come back on in the future, so we're going to continue that conversation with him. I highly recommend you check out his radio show, What in the World with Richard Garner. It's on Sirius XM, channel 167, and check out the great work that he's been doing. But it might actually be a great segue for my next guest here in the second hour. I have the one and only Richard Dolan joining me from Rochester, New York. And he really needs no introduction on this show. But for anybody tuning in that is not familiar with Richard Dolan's work, Richard's been researching UFOs for over 20 years, and he's the author of several volumes of history on the subject, one speculative book about the future, and his newest book, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, is an absolutely must read if you have any kind of fascination with the subject of ETs and UFOs and this fascinating subject. It's even if you're just new to it or whether you've got experience in it. I've read through the book and there's information there for everybody. And I know Richard's also got some more projects on the go, which I'm very excited to talk to him about. And as I mentioned in the first hour, he'll be one of the keynote speakers on our upcoming Canada Disclosure Tour here in Canada. We'll be hitting 4 major Canadian cities, starting in Montreal on April 4th. Following weekend, we'll be in Toronto. And then the weekend after that, we're going to be hitting up Calgary and Vancouver. We have an excellent cast of speakers on this subject, and all points of this subject imaginable are going to be covered. And we're going to weave in a lot of other topics as well that I think are important to relate to people. So very warm welcome to Richard Dolan. Richard, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me. Welcome to Truth Warrior, my friend.
David, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to get together with you. We, of course, had an amazing month of traveling across Canada about a year ago. So
absolutely,
we're brothers, man.
Totally. And we did some martial art training. We had some mind-blowing talks. We had some good times. And I definitely look forward to having you come down and speak here in Canada again. I know the reception we had when you joined us last time. We did 12 cities. We had you in an RV, which almost blew up at one point, which was kind of crazy. So
that is exactly right.
I'm glad that you're alive and we were able to bring you back home in one piece. And I'm glad you're willing to work with us again.
I'm happy to. And actually, you were one of the real highlights of that trip for me, and a lot of the conversations that you and I had, I think, I know we both enjoyed them. And I think people standing around us when we were talking enjoyed them as well. So I'm glad to be chatting with you today.
Awesome. Well, you know what? We were just talking to Richard Garner. I'm not sure if you've ever been on his show before in Canada. He's got a great radio show here. And we were just getting into some of the subjects regarding the whole UFO ET disclosure subject. And we were just opening it up and then we had to end the show. So I think it's a great segue for you to come in, my friend. I mean, your work and the way you present it in such a scholarly manner, and in my opinion, it brings so much credibility to the subject, if only people would review your work, is just, it's unmatchable. And I think it's just so valuable to have that kind of information, that kind of validity, that kind of tone to the conversation added to it, so that way people can really go down this rabbit hole for themselves. And so I'm so glad you're going to be a part of this upcoming tour. Why don't you share a little bit about what's been going on with you? And I know you've been doing a bunch of events and got some stuff going on.
I have been. Well, I just want to follow up on what you said. Regarding the UFO issue, I could not agree more. I've been involved in this now for over 20 years. It's been my obsession for all of that time. And some people would step back and think, well, why would you be obsessed over UFOs, flying saucers for 20 years? What's wrong with you? I would reply that the UFO issue is kind of like a crowbar, as I see it. And it's a crowbar that pries open a door that's sealed shut, that opens the way to helping us reevaluate our entire panoply of illusions that I think envelop our world and that come at us from every single direction. For me, the UFO reality, understanding it, asking myself the question, is it real? Why are people interested in it? Why is there an apparent cover-up? All of this is very important. And when you answer one question about this, it opens up dozens of other questions, and that leads to this entire array of what we call the alternative research community. It's not just UFOs. It leads into covert assassinations like the Kennedy assassination and many others, or geoengineering, or false flags, or GMO foods. Honestly, when you crack or shatter one important paradigm, it leads to many, many others falling. In other words, once you realize, as I did, that the UFO reality was a genuine thing, UFOs are a genuine thing, they're being covered up, you inevitably ask yourself, what else could be a lie? What else could be a lie in our society? And is there a relationship between one lie and another lie, and on and on and on? And what you find is, in fact, there's a much greater relationship than people would ordinarily think, and it just shatters your worldview. I'm at the point now where I had an earlier time, I suppose, when I was emotionally attached to the worldview that I grew up in. Those days are long gone, and I, it's liberating, because I find that I don't really necessarily need to have a sense of certainty that I once thought that I did have. It's okay not knowing certain things. But the UFO phenomenon for me has been a very intellectually liberating subject.
Well, and you've been into this for like over 20 years, and you originally were just trying to research further into history. That was your main subject and what you were trying to write a thesis on, and then you stumbled across this subject, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
And where would you say it's led you now? I mean, in the UFO community, you've been to, I don't know, hundreds or not thousands of conferences, and you've covered this issue extensively.
Yes.
There seems to be almost like a closed-mindedness to other subjects in a lot of areas. It seems to be they're very much tunnel vision only on the subject of UFOs. And then when you get into some of these more geopolitical or conspiratorial realms,
right,
they're very closed-minded to the UFO subject. Do you see any of that shifting now and kind of blending more in this time?
Well, in my own work, I'm all about combining those. I've never been solely a guy who just looks at UFO cases. That's never been my interest. I have a very excellent memory for UFO cases, and I can remember hundreds and maybe thousands of them. I'm lucky like that. But what I'm really interested in is the political implications of this phenomenon, always have been, right from the beginning. So where my work is now leading me, in fact, some of the most recent lectures that I've been developing have been looking at a broader geopolitical approach to the entire cover-up and implications of the end of that cover-up, of what we call disclosure. So it's not simply a U.S. angle, but it's China, it's Russia, it's the entire development in our world of continual false flags. All of these things actually have a relationship to the UFO phenomenon, as I'm seeing more and more. So when I bring in a geopolitical analysis to the UFO cover-up, which I just did a week ago at the International UFO Congress in Phoenix before 1,000 people in the audience, I can tell you I got a very, very enthusiastic reception to it. So I think that people who are engaged in this phenomenon, they are hungry for a deeper understanding of what's going on. And, an approach that I have is not the only way to look at it, but it's one valid approach, I think. Trying to understand how this fits in the big picture scenario, in our global scenario. And I don't pretend that I have every single answer here, but I think about this all the time. I'm thinking about, on the one hand, the global nature of the phenomenon itself, the nature of the secrecy, the creation of what I've often called a breakaway civilization, and how that relates to our contemporary geopolitical situation, for example, in which, to pick one example out of many, the United States is in an undeclared war right now against Russia. Right, I mean, I think we can all see the Cold War has been rebooted. Maybe it never ended, but it's certainly going on now. There's certainly a rivalry with China as well. People often ask me, well, if the United States is, if there's a cover-up in the United States, what about other countries? Why isn't Russia talking? Why isn't China talking? Why isn't Brazil talking? And I've given these a lot of thought, and these have been now entering into my lectures, and they'll be certainly entering into my next book on the subject of UFOs, which will be the third volume of UFOs in a National Security State, which I've been asked about for quite some time. That book will be, it'll be done at some point soon. I should say that I'm actually working on 2 books simultaneously. This is part of the mark of the insanity of my life. So I'm working on volume 3 of the National Security State series, and that'll be about probably a 600-page book. But I'm also working on another book, which I don't really want to get into the specifics just right now, but I will say that it's been a fascinating, absolutely riveting piece of research, and I think that when it's out, people will be very glad that it's out.
Well, I definitely look forward to it. And just the way that I see your research, and I mean, I watched your presentation in Canada 12 times, and I each time pulled something new out of it and really enjoyed the way that you brought even new information every time you presented it, bringing forward eclectic research, not just one, like a one-dimensional approach, is very important. And I think that the work you're doing with these books, the fact that you have this 3rd volume of history specifically on the subject of UFOs, but then simultaneously working on some of these other projects to bring other pieces of this puzzle forward, how has that changed you as a person and helped you develop on your road to being a truth warrior?
Well, I feel that I'm 52 years old now, and I feel honestly that I've never been in a better place mentally in my entire life. I feel like right now I've had an entire lifetime of building up to right where I am right now. All the cylinders are firing, the fire is burning in a full roar, and I'm at the point where this year I feel like I can do just about anything that's thrown in front of me. And I've been in a good mode for quite some time intellectually. I've felt like, especially for the past 5-6 years, I think since I kicked off the 2nd volume of UFOs in a National Security State, that was in 2009, I think that was a bit of a turning point. Reason was I wrote my first book, published it in the early part of the century, wrote a bunch of articles after that, did a lot of appearances, but it took me many years before that 2nd volume came out. I was raising 2 children. I had a very active family life, and a lot was going on. But starting in 2009, I published volume 2 of National Security State. It was a 638-page book. Then a year after that, I published AD After Disclosure, to the shock of some of my readers who were expecting a 3rd volume of history. Instead, I do this speculative book about the future, which was a fantastic exercise. 2 years after that, I published UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, which in many ways, as you were talking about, you like it, I feel it's the culmination of all of my thought on this subject. So I feel that for the past 5-6 years, I've just been in the highest gear possible. And now I'm moving into yet new directions, and I'm trying to explore. I'm coming back in a sense. I'm not leaving UFOs at all, of course, but I'm coming back to my foundation of thinking, which is politics and philosophy. And to me, if I can't understand the UFO phenomenon within that broader context, and I have no interest in studying it. If someone were to say to me, you could write a really good history that deals with the phenomenon of UFOs in a reliable way, I would think, well, that's interesting. But what I'm really interested in doing is writing a book with some passion, with blood, as it were, that really explores, in the best sense of the word, with the greatest people who've ever written about this. I want to take my stand alongside that. I want to at least try for it. I want to try to write a book that I think is something that will last for many, many years. And whether it does or doesn't is irrelevant, but that's always what I'm striving for. I feel like if you're not going to, don't just do something for it to be okay. Do something for it to be great. And if you're not striving for greatness, then what are you really doing, I want this work. I want to push myself to the maximum extent possible. And when I give a lecture or when I write a book, I want it to be scholarly, but I also want it to grab at people's passion, and I want to engage people. I want them to understand why these subjects are so important, why UFOs do matter, why government cover-ups do matter. And all too often in our world, I mean, really what people are under is an assault. They're under an assault by their culture, by their government. And it's an assault that's designed to control them both externally through laws and internally through their mind, to make them docile. And I don't ever want to support that. I always want to oppose that. In terms of the UFO phenomenon, I mean, think of it this way. We have something that's happening around us in this world that involves technology that is not supposed to exist. A silent flying triangle. One example, a black triangle. These have been seen thousands of times over the past many years. They're real. Someone's operating them, whether it's human or non-human. That's almost secondary. Someone's got this technology. Why are we not talking about this openly? There's obviously a post-petroleum solution in that technology, and yet it's being covered up. Why is it being covered up? Well, I think we can take a few guesses here, because if it were to be out there in the open, that would take down the world's largest industry, which is petroleum, which dominates this world geopolitically, which is the foundation for the entire hierarchical power structure, I think, that exists here on this planet. That's why there's a cover-up. That's one reason right there.
And one of many, would you agree? Because I think that, when we start to ask these questions, as you were talking about before, the minute you start asking that first question, more questions start to pop into your mind. And I remember talking to you about this, I can't remember when we were on the trip together, but we were just sort of speculating about all of the reasons or many other possible reasons for this sort of the blockade of this information coming out. And I even asked Richard Garner in the first hour what his opinion was, and I wanted to ask you the same question. Is it reasonable to think that there's a possibility that one of the reasons why this information hasn't been disclosed is not just because there's a human element of the government trying to close this information down? We know that exists, but is there possibly some kind of a truth embargo levied by these visitors themselves? If they are indeed engaging this planet, could there be a higher control structure beyond what we look at in the geopolitical, physical, so to speak?
I believe the answer is yes. I strongly believe the answer is yes. I mean, this my take on the scenario is probably like this. I think whoever they are, let's call them aliens. I think they're not us. They're not of our civilization, and I think they've been monitoring us probably for a very, very long time. Now, in what we would call ancient times, it would be incredibly easy for them to monitor us without us really being able to do anything about it or be aware of them. Honestly, I think it'd be the easiest thing in the world. Human population was very, very sparse. Human technology, by our standards, was essentially nil. And they could have had a very low-key presence for centuries, maybe, being here from time to time, maybe living underground in nice secure bases where they can play ping pong all day. Who knows what they're doing, but out of our sight. Suddenly, here comes the 20th century. And the 20th century gives, humanity really is like leaping into the sky here. I mean, literally, we have flight, we have radar, which can detect things electronically from a long distance, and we have other electronic means of detection. And suddenly, the advanced guard of our civilization, that is the military intelligence community and the military scientific community, is detecting something. They're detecting these others. Now that's this phase that we're at still right now, is where the leading advanced guard of humanity knows that there's something going on. And the thing is that they're not telling the rest of us openly about it. But we're starting to figure it out too. So this is really what we're talking about as an interim stage. Now, these other beings, let's think about it from their point of view for a moment. I like to play historical little what-if games myself. And, what if we human beings were to go back a mere 1,000 years into the human past? I've used this analogy a number of times, so people have heard it, forgive me. But it's instructive. You and I go back with our knowledge, with our little iPhones and our smartphones and our tablets and everything that we know about the world of the 21st century. And we go back 1,000 years to 11th century Europe. And we have to ask ourselves, how much could we tell those people about what we know and about our worldview? Answer, probably next to nothing, without the torches and pitchforks coming out and without their heads going pop.
Right, yeah.
Realistically. Now, and those are people of our exact same species who are a mere 1,000 years removed from us chronologically. And those are people that presumably we would wish no harm. But there would be so little that we could tell them. Now consider a truly alien species with an alien psychology. Beings that probably don't have the same types of psychological reactions as human beings. I mean, we are, after all, very specifically psychologically designed, partly because we, we nurse for so long. We bond with our mothers in a certain way. We have certain types of emotional responses that what if this is an alien intelligence that's the creation of some kind of advanced AI? They would have a totally different psychology than we would. I would hazard to guess that they would, and what if they have relative IQs of 500 or more? I mean, really. It would be almost impossible for them to be able to relate to us in a way that would make sense to us. And in fact, when you listen to testimonies of certain people who've had apparent abduction experiences, I'm thinking of one who was interviewed at length by the late John Mack, a man that I've since gotten to know. He said, when you're with them, they have to slow their thinking down dramatically just to be able to relate to us. They're not like us. They have a hive mentality, in his view. They all know each other's thoughts. It's totally different from us. So that type of civilization is so radically different from our own. Does it make any sense for them to land on the White House lawn like in the day the earth stood still and say, take me to your leader? No, it makes no sense. No sense at all, because their way of thinking is truly, very probably, alien. So there is a truth embargo by them. My guess is that they don't really want the hassle of trying to relate to us in an open way. How would most people react to this? I talk about disclosure frequently. I've written a book about disclosure. But honestly, when you really think about it in terms of human society, is there a possibility that what we consider our current civilization would simply dissolve in the face of this unbelievable, awe-inspiring and frightening alien reality? I have a lot of friends and colleagues in this field who are aching for disclosure, and they want open contact with these other beings. Space brothers, sometimes people call them. Galactic Federation of Light is one thing that you hear frequently. Well, I don't really know if those things exist. You have people who claim that they exist. It's based on no proof, no evidence whatsoever. I do suspect, though, at least in theory, that these beings are not going to be easy for us to relate to. One of my friends in this field is Whitley Strieber, who I consider one of the most intelligent and deep thinkers that we have in this field. And Whitley has had what he believes are direct experiences with these other beings. And he says when you are face to face with them, it's like mentally they strip you bare. You're like a cowering dog in the face of, a person that you're intimidated by. And he says he believes very few people actually have the ability to withstand that psychologically and keep their wits about them. What if that's true? So there's a lot of reasons why there's going to be secrecy on this. The dilemma that we have, the problem we have as a society, is all of that's irrelevant. We're on a path. We are on a path toward disclosure, and we're never going to be ready. I've never believed that we'll be ready, but that will never stop us from happening. It'll never stop disclosure from happening. It's like, I like to say, no one's ready for their first child. We're never ready for it, but boom, there it comes. And
exactly.
Disclosure, that's right, it's going to happen. We're not going to be ready, and I do think there will be effects that are going to be very, very psychologically damaging. Think about the web of lies that have enveloped every single person on this planet. A, aliens don't exist. B, governments are not supposed to lie to you. Sometimes they lie, but we have to, and prosecute them when they do. And C, 9/11 was done by, Arabs from elsewhere. D, there are no chemtrails that are poisoning our skies and our crops. You can go on and on and on. I'll tell you right now, when the disclosure on this happens, everything gets opened up. Everything. This did not really come out in my book, A, Day After Disclosure. A, I wrote it 5 years ago. B, my co-author was part of the mix, and he had his own opinions, and we kind of worked that out together. But what I believe is that disclosure is going to open everything up. And when you've got a world of people, think of Americans who are psychologically hanging on emotionally to certain ideas. You try to get in an argument with someone about 9/11, for example, and you see how angry they can get, how emotional they get, because they're hanging on to that belief. It's an emotional fact of their life. UFOs don't appear to have that same emotional power, but you just wait for disclosure to happen, and it will. When people realize they've been lied to for over 70 years by their government, guaranteed, there's going to be a lot of psychological trauma. So the moorings will be out from underneath us.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That's well said, Richard. We're going to go to our first break here, man. So let's continue this line of thought on the other side. We're just getting warmed up here, ladies and gentlemen, with Richard Dolan. We're back here on Truth Warrior in just a few minutes. And welcome back, everyone. You're tuning to Truth Warrior here on truthfrequencyradio.com. My name is David Whitehead, your host, and I'm speaking tonight with Richard Dolan. And it's richarddolanpress.com. That's his website. Go check it out. He's got lots of great information there. You can also order his books and get more information about the work that he does. And he will also be a keynote speaker at the upcoming Disclosure Tour Canada. We'll be breaking down this information in more detail. Richard's going to be speaking at 3 of the 4 cities. He's going to be in Montreal and also Calgary and Vancouver. The only city we're not able to secure him for would be Toronto. So we're going to be bringing down Stanton Friedman to cover that event. And I'm very much looking forward to having this wide ranging of viewpoints on this subject brought forward. It's the first type of event of its kind done in this manner in Canada, as far as I know. And I think that it's going to be a great event to check out. If you want more information, the website is modernknowledge.ca, and everything is there for you. And we appreciate all the support and help and the kind words of support and whatnot that we've received from people literally all over Canada and from other countries around the world as well. It's been sort of a long journey from starting this venture here in Canada to try to get this information out. And we're really happy to be able to continue doing this and see the interest grow. And speaking of that, welcome back, Richard. In your opinion, do you see that in general, there is a lot more interest in not only the UFO subject, but a lot of these subjects that are just been labeled fringe or been passed off as conspiracy theories or just completely marginalized from public discussion? Do you feel like that the reason why we're seeing more of an aggressive attack from the media and from, I guess, sort of the official side is because more people are getting curious about this and are doing their research and looking into work like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I could not put it more strongly. I started researching UFOs back in the early 1990s. My God, it feels like a million years ago. At that time, this is really pre-web. There was a little bit of an internet. There were bulletin boards and things. There was what was called Usenet. Some old timers remember that. But there was no World Wide Web. There was no graphical user interface. And it really was a different intellectual climate. When I started researching UFOs back then, I literally had to sneak around with my books. I would go into the University of Rochester library, hiding my UFO books because I didn't want people to see it. And that would go for any other kinds of conspiracy. I remember talking with a professor at the university there about JFK. This is early 1990s. And even then it was, God forbid you have a conspiratorial attitude about JFK's assassination a quarter of a century after the fact. It was not really possible. I think much has changed. And what has changed is that the web has allowed people to talk to each other outside of highly channeled, corralled sort of venues, which had always been the case in the past. People had created their own little privately run magazines and things like that of limited circulation. But suddenly, with the web, we have the ability to reach millions of people. Back in the late 90s, when Bill Clinton was still president, there was a famous remark by Hillary. She was very unhappy with this new World Wide Web. And in fact, she wanted to look into measures to control the web. This is back in the 1997, 98, because the what was mainstream media was being too much questioned by alternative media. And I think the big one they were going after at the time was Drudge, which was one of the first big kind of alternative media sources that got a lot of press. And she wanted to take the Drudge report down. I remember this very distinctly. That's just that's one aspect of the greater issue. You've got Drudge and you've got all of the other alternative news sites that are out there on the left, on the right, and of every kind of shade that you can imagine. And that's a wonderful thing. That's exactly what we've needed. So it's been 20 years of that now. We've had basically 20 years of an alternative research community that's out there on the web, and it's leaving its mark. Relating to UFOs, 2 years ago I was part of the citizen hearing on disclosure, organized by Stephen Bassett, who will be on the disclosure tour along with me and along with you. And a number of those presentations, including one of my own, is on YouTube. And what you see is that an entire new generation of people going on to YouTube looking for UFO information stumble across this hearing that was held with 6 retired members of the United States Congress by researchers who were dressed in nice suits, who were very dignified, spoke very well overall on the subject, in a very serious environment. And it's things like that that are having a cultural effect. It is happening. What we're seeing right now is it's a war between the established hierarchy, which controls the corporate media, television news basically, which is still quite prominent, still quite dominant. They control the entertainment industry. They control all TV. It's not just news. It's all TV programming, which also has very, very explicit social cues and social programming that they try to inculcate on us.
Well, I've always thought it funny that they call it television programming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, are people increasingly going around that whole system through the web and in a conversation with each other where we're just learning from each other outside of this kind of nanny state-guided system. And that's really the battle. At some point, I don't know when this is going to happen, but I have to believe at some point it'll be like the story of the emperor's new clothes, where someone points out the obvious, which is that the emperor's wearing nothing at all. And will tear away this fiction that we've been living under for so long, which is this mainstream corporate-dominated propaganda system, and it'll just come down. The aftermath of that, of course, as I said in the last segment, is that it's going to be a really wild ride, and it won't all be fun. But honestly, how do we want to live our lives? I often think if you're sleeping and you're having this wonderful dream about being on a beach and someone's giving you a foot massage and sunshine, you got a margarita, that's a great dream. But what if in reality, while that dream is going on, your house is burning down? So would you want to wake up from the dream and deal with the reality of your house burning down? Well, I would. And we're kind of in this dream-like illusion now. In reality, the global house is burning down. Never before in human history have we had a situation where a very few people have the ability literally to own every single thing that's worth owning on this planet. Water, minerals, GMO foods, you name it. And it's all happening. And that's actually behind a lot of the geopolitical warfare that's going on right now, the war between America and Russia, and even the rise of ISIS. All of these are long issues to get into. Behind it all, though, is something else, is a breakaway civilization. That is a deep black budget group that has had access to exotic technology, exotic science, retrievals of what we would call UFO technology. All of this is part of the mix. And what I believe is going to happen, I think that there are basically 3 disclosure scenarios. In fact, maybe I can go over those, and that might be a good way to take this discussion. The scenario number 1, I think, would be the accidental or premature disclosure. And that could happen as a result of what's going on right now between America and Russia. So basically what's happening with Russia, this is a very simple thing. All right, the United States is in an economic decline. We're drowning in debt over here. All right, there's a very real chance that the dollar's reign as the world reserve currency may come to an end. It all has to do with the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia has agreed for years and years and years to sell all of their oil in dollars. What that has done is it's essentially forced all of the nations of the world to trade oil in dollars, hence the petrodollar. And what that has done for the United States economy is it's given the U.S. government a tremendous amount of power. All these other nations have billions and trillions of U.S. dollars, and they need those dollars if they're going to buy energy, which they all do. And the U.S. can print off trillions of dollars to fight these useless wars, and they can get no other nation can do what the United States does in terms of printing out its money because it's got the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Other nations are not happy about this. What we're seeing now is Russia and China, for example, are making energy deals that exclude the petrodollar. Saddam Hussein tried to do this over a decade ago. He was trying to sell his oil in euros, and that's one big reason why he got taken down. Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in 2011 was creating a gold-backed dinar. It was going to be an alternate currency that was going to threaten the dollar. He had to come down. Right now, Russia and China are working on a way around the dollar. They're a little more powerful than Gaddafi. They're a little more powerful than Saddam Hussein. Anyway, there's this potential of a new gold-backed world reserve currency. And what Wall Street and the White House are on a mission to prevent this from happening. And their bonus plan is basically to take down Russia and control all the vast Russian wealth. They want to create regime change. They want to take Putin out, just like they did in Ukraine a year ago. All of that. That's what's happening now. So the plan is take Putin down, pave the way for regime change, lie their asses off about everything from MH17 to what's going on in eastern Ukraine and on and on. But let's say that this dangerous gambit by the U.S. fails, because it might fail. Because, in fact, what Vladimir Putin is doing since September, when John Kerry met with the Saudis to crush the ruble by pumping out oil and dropping the price of oil. They want to destroy the ruble, just like they did this to the Soviet Union back in the 80s. It worked then, but it's probably not going to work now. Putin is selling his oil in dollars, and he's selling his dollars off and buying gold. He's getting massive amounts of gold right now. And the Russian economy is hurting a bit, but in the long term, I think they're going to do very, very well. The real danger is Russia and China leading the way toward a massive global dump of the dollar. I don't know that this will happen. There can be major repercussions against them as well as the entire world if it happens, but it might be inevitable. If this were to happen, disclosure scenario number one, premature disclosure, could be caused by basically a U.S. hyperinflation, collapse economy, and the end of America's run as a global hegemonic superpower. This really can happen. Now, in a situation, of course, the scary thing is America would still have the world's most terrifying military-industrial complex, and when you have a broke nation with a lot of weapons and bombs, you have to be afraid of what might happen next.
It'd be like the fall of the Soviet Union on steroids, basically.
Exactly, and think about what happened during the fall of the Soviet Union in terms of UFO information. A lot of information leaked out.
Yeah, that's right.
At the end of the Soviet era, a lot came out. It's like rats jumping off of a sinking ship. There's this, often you have a window that opens in which data comes out. And what you could have is when everything's collapsing around, someone within the U.S. national security complex could very well see an opportunity for releasing critically important UFO data that could essentially force disclosure. I think this is a real possibility. I don't know about anyone else who's talking about this, but this is an idea that I cannot get out of my head and I think can absolutely happen. So that's one possibility. Some people ask me about other nations, like would Russia or China disclose? And I'm actually not seeing motivation there. Despite the fact that a couple of years ago, Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, made a statement. Many people who follow this field understand or are aware of what he said. Basically, Medvedev, who's second most powerful politician in Russia, off after an interview, but still on camera, seemingly very casually, with a straight face, talked about a briefcase that every top Russian political leader gets. One has all of the atomic nuclear codes, and the other has information on aliens living on Earth and the security services that monitor them and control them. And then where the media, of course, turned this into a big joke is he said more detailed information you can get from a well-known documentary called Men in Black. It was translated as well-known movie, Men in Black, which of course is the Hollywood movie. But in fact, there's a Russian documentary called Men in Black, which is a very serious treatment. The point is, Medvedev, I think, was quite serious. I don't know Dmitry Medvedev, but I believe from just looking at that video many times, I think he was serious. But that doesn't mean that the Russians are going to disclose. If the Russians were to disclose the reality of UFOs, they have as much to lose as the American power structure does. They're just as dependent, more dependent, frankly, on oil. I mean, that's their entire national economy. China, too, if they were just to let this secret out, you see, it's just too disruptive for all of these nations. This is what I think. And most other nations that are not power players probably lack the specific knowledge that the U.S. intelligence community has, that the British intelligence community has, that the Russian and Chinese and some of the Europeans have. So I think most nations won't have the ability to do it. But I think if in the event of a U.S. economic collapse caused by the failure of the current strategy against Russia could happen, that could cause disclosure from inside the U.S. I think disclosure scenario number 2 is the preferred disclosure that our elites want. Here's the basic situation as I see it. We're in the middle of 2 races. It's like 2 foot races. 1 foot race is between the people and our handlers. Problem number 1 is we've got greater social awareness sparked by the web, which we talked about. Their solution, control the web. And we see increasing moves around the world to control the internet. Here in the U.S., I think we scored a victory recently with the preservation of net neutrality. You got a lot of people saying that there's a Trojan horse in there for greater federal control over the net. Could happen. Haven't read the details. I don't think anyone has. There's no question, though, worldwide, tremendous movement by political powers to control the internet through surveillance, through censorship, and the like.
We have that here in Canada as well. We've got it admitting, we have our prime minister and their cabinet admitting that they're creating social media accounts and having federal agents, spying on people and monitoring conversations and editing conversations. So yeah, it's happening everywhere.
Yeah. Americans love to think of Canada as this land of liberty. And honestly, I mean, Canada's a great country. I love Canada, but you've got the same kind of problems up there that we have down here.
Oh, absolutely. We're very much the 51st state over here, I think.
Yeah, it's very much becoming a police state there. So another problem is people, sharing ideas and technological breakthroughs with each other through file sharing. So the solution there is you control file sharing, and you create an international legal structure to prevent this from happening. I mean, really, the excuse they're giving is they don't want you to steal, the Master and Commander or some other movie. Like, God forbid, you're going to break the industry. What they really don't want is for you to share next generation technological solutions through 3D printing. That's like the next generation of the Pirate Bay. People are going to be uploading their inventions. All right, this is an amazing. I don't hear people talking about this, but think about it. Next generation 3D printers are going to be able to do mixed materials, so they'll be able to do integrated circuits. They'll be able to do organic materials. They're going to be like magical replicator devices, and there are going to be a lot of smart people in this world uploading their own CAD designs of their own innovative inventions that you or I or anyone else will be able to download. That is an enormous threat to the status quo, and that is the primary thing they want to stop right now. They want to stop it before inventions get out of hand and we kind of break. Someone uploads a energy harvesting device that allows you to go off the grid and you don't have to pay your utilities. I mean, that would be a wonderful thing. They don't want that to happen, guaranteed. Another problem is basically a restive population due to fewer and fewer meaningful jobs. So what's the solution there? You create a police state. That's the race. Will they create a total police state before people make their own breakthrough and break the police state? That is literally the race. There's another race between our secret keepers or the breakaway civilization and these other beings. All right, so here's a couple of possibilities going on here. A, is humanity simply a vassal or hostage to some extent to these other beings? Could be. In which case, is our leadership working for these other beings, or is our leadership working against these other beings? Either possibility is there. In any case, there's probably an attempt, guaranteed, for our classified world to play catch-up to some extent. In other words, from a military point of view, this has to be the case. They see these other beings here who are vastly more advanced than we are. And I guarantee you, generals and intelligence community people are looking at that thinking, holy smokes, we are so far behind. We have got to catch up or we're toast. The only way for them to do that is through absolute secrecy. They do not want the world to know about this for their own reasons. They don't want to cause panic, or they don't want that to be out in the open. If they're having a secret war against other beings, they probably don't want to advertise it. So what that means is you have to create an intensely elaborate black budget civilization. It means you have to do all kinds of end runs around your formal constitutional form of government. You basically kill your republic. You kill your democratic system. And I think what it ultimately means is the creation of a hierarchical authoritarian state. That's what they're looking for. And only then, after they've completed that creation, I believe, will there be a voluntary kind of disclosure of sorts. So they want to enforce intellectual property rights. They want to create a total surveillance state, total intimidation state. They want to turn web into TV, which we're already seeing. I've looked at a advertisement for one of the smart TV things, or Samsung, I think it is. And
these things are scary. You tell people about this because this is just incredible where these devices are going.
Exactly. What they're trying to do is to create your television experience. So you can have your little icon for your Facebook and for your Netflix and for your Hulu Plus and your Skype and your Twitter and USA Today or whatever the hell you got in Canada, the equivalent, the same little rag that means, right, the propaganda, History Channel and your Wall Street Journal. So it's all these little buttons, but they're all like corporate media buttons. And they try to guide you. They're corralling people. They don't want a wide open web. They want a web that's corralled into corporate channels. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the first segment, right now we're in the middle of a creation of continuous false flag events. This is part of the phase of our civilization that we're in. They have to create false flags. The reason is, when you're in the midst of creating a global transformation, you have to motivate people to go from point A to point B. Point A is a point of freedom. Point B is a point of subservience and ducking your head and being used to a surveillance state 24/7. And to get people to that, you periodically have to create events that have powerful emotional resonance, that terrify them sufficiently to make them to run to the state for protection. And so I think the creation of false flags is I'm suggesting that it's actually a temporary, but for their point of view, necessary phase of our civilization. Once they've clamped down a complete global totalitarian system, I'm pretty sure they won't need the kind of false flags that are going on because they'll have total control. It won't be necessary. What they're looking for is to have total control of a global intellectual life. And then, and only then, will there be disclosure, at least from their preferred disclosure scenario. In other words, to achieve disclosure of this alien presence within a 24/7 all-encompassing virtual fascist society. I think that's what they want. Now, we can go a step further and say, what is the end game of our human handlers here, vis-a-vis these others especially? What I try to do is imagine our world in 50 years. This is hard to do, but let's just take a couple of ideas that a lot of leading thinkers are looking at. 50 years from now, I think it's fair to say we'll have very advanced artificial intelligence, artificial super intelligence. In other words, beyond just chess programs that can beat the world chess champion. We'll have quantum computing. We'll have computers that can think, essentially, that will seem like they can think at a highly advanced level. We'll have quantum computing, which, is utterly revolutionary. We'll have complete DNA control, being able to customize organisms probably any way you want, for length, for strength, for longevity, for intelligence. Basically, they'll be able to create a true master race, achieve Hitler's dream. It's just going to be in 50 years, not in the 1930s, but in the 2070s, 2080s.
So probably. Sort of like a full-on transhumanist type future.
Absolutely.
Where they're integrating us.
A class-based transhumanism, no. Because I cannot believe they're going to give these abilities to everyone.
Exactly.
It'll be for them. Along with implants for superpowers, which actually militaries already have. They have certain abilities that would blow people's minds. Ocular implants and oral implants where you can communicate with someone else without needing any other kind of technology because it's implanted in your jaw and things like this. There'll be organic 3D printing, which can give you replacement organs or maybe replacement people. Who the hell knows? All of that's 50 years from now. We're going to have a class-based transhumanist society. They're going to be a master race, literally, and basically literally a slave race that'll probably have IQs of 85, and they'll watch your football games and they're dancing with the whatever, and they'll be happy.
So the Hunger Games, basically.
Yeah. Honestly, Yes, it'll be a utopia for those who can afford it, not an ideal future. That's I think the preferred. That's where we're moving. Now there's a third option, and I know I've only got a couple of minutes here. Disclosure scenario number 3, I call people-driven disclosure. And this can happen. It's kind of similar to the to accidental disclosure, which I talked about, but it could be something that comes as a result of a groundswell. In other words, people supporting groups that leak information, whether it's WikiLeaks or Anonymous or groups like that, which are, or people like Edward Snowden, who I know there's all kinds of arguments over, are these people working for the other side secretly or not? My take is they're leaking valuable information that we need to have, and I think efforts like that have to be supported around the world. I think that supporting good UFO research is important. I think engaging in focus and pragmatic citizen action is important. All of these can help to trigger the kind of scenario that's people-based, that can promote or that can push this out into the open and cause really what will be nothing other than a deep, profound revolution in human civilization.
Wow. Well, Richard, I hate to end it here. This is great, and I really look forward to you presenting more detailed information on this in your upcoming books, upcoming talks. modernknowledge.ca. Ladies and gentlemen, you can get the tickets, and also richarddolanpress.com. Thanks, Richard. We'll talk again soon, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks.